of boxing.
Welcome to the 5 Live Boxing Podcast. What a few months it's been in America and in Britain. And we've been there. It's been a ridiculous schedule of great fights. Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder, Canelo Alvarez against Caleb Plant. And this last weekend in America, Terence Crawford, arguably the number 2 fighter in the world, the number 2 pound for pound fighter, defending his WBO welterweight title against Sean Porter. And next weekend, coming up, Teofimo Lopez at Madison Square Garden in New York, defending his lightweight world titles in the much postponed and discussed fight against George Kambosos. It's an American-themed podcast, I guess you could phrase it. Now, we were going to be hearing from Chris Eubank and Leon Williams. We went down and had a chat with the pair of them about their fight coming up in December, but literally within 24 hours of me speaking to the pair of them, and it was really good stuff, to be perfectly honest with you. The fight looks like it's been, well, certainly pushed back and perhaps even delayed. Williams pulling out of that particular fight. So it's an American-themed podcast. Well, rightly so. And I'm going to go back to Las Vegas, where Mark Kriegel, one of the finest writers of his generation, indeed of any generation, was ringside for Crawford against Porter. Mark, thank you so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure to be here.
We're going to get straight into what happened in the small hours for us on Sunday morning, but your Saturday night. Terence Crawford, 16th world title fight against Sean Porter, and finished in the 10th round. And up until then, I thought Porter was just about in front, but he wasn't walking away. What was your view from 12 feet or 10 feet away, Mark?
Porter said, I have to control the rhythm. I can't take any time off. And I have to use every little thing I've learned. Until the point that he got knocked out, I wasn't saying, I'm not arguing that he had a decisive advantage, but I thought that he had controlled, for the most part, the tempo, particularly through the first 6 rounds. I could see Terence figure him out. And those body shots that Terence throws when he gets a little distance on them are incapacitating. If you go back to, I think, his last fight at 140, the Ndongo fight, once Terence figures out the distance and he slings those long, hard shots to the body, they become incapacitating. But I thought until then, you saw the very, very best of Sean Porter. And I think that I'd like to make the argument that on another night, he beats every other welterweight, probably including Spence. I thought he came out sharper than he came out against Spence. Now, I always thought it would come down to this, that the one thing that Sean doesn't have, he's big, he's very physical, he plays like an American football player, he bum rushes you, he out physicals you, but in terms of the kind of power that 1 or 2 shots can change the fight, that's what he doesn't have, and that's what Terence does, and ultimately that was the difference.
So at the point of the stoppage, Mark, how would you, if I'd have asked you to take 10 seconds and tell me how you were scoring it as we went in to round 10, because the judges had it, 2 judges had it to Crawford by 1 round, 1 judge had it to Crawford by 3 rounds, but certain other people, people that I half follow or people that I would half listen to, they had it maybe a little bit close, or maybe Porter up a round. How would you have had it going into the first seconds of round 10, Mark?
I had Porter up a round.
There we go. So
but of course, my now brilliant American compatriots all disagree with me, and they said it was a foregone conclusion. But
do you know? I mean, listen, I know you guys have a full expression for that. Monday, was it Monday night quarterback, isn't it, or something like that?
Monday morning, yes.
Yeah, Monday morning, where everyone's a genius after the event. Well, let me tell you something. You think you got it bad there? It's a disease here. It's contagious. I'm telling you.
Steve, but the judges did have it unanimously for
in
Crawford.
favor of Crawford.
Right, but then again, I mean, the Las Vegas judges have been having a banner year, as you well know.
Absolutely. Hey, listen, bizarrely, they're still working. So I want to deal with two or three aspects of the finish of the fight. First of all, and I know that you're close to them because you wrote a fabulous article in the build-up to the fight. Kenny Porter, Sean's father, and the man that's next to him all the time, the man that lives opposite him, the man that has breakfast with him every day, the man that's been there from day one. They're close. They're even closer than some father and son. Good relationships. He jumps up on the apron and signals it's all after 81 seconds of round 10 when Sean's been dropped twice. He's up, he's beaten the count, slightly slower the second count than the first count. First of all, and then he launches into, I don't know, I'm not saying it was untrue, some of the things he said about his son, because I don't know what went on in the camp. But I'm not quite sure that was the right time to reveal some of those home truths when your son is 30 whatever 6-year-old son is standing on your elbow. What was your take about that? And then secondly, Mark, sorry for the long question, what was your take on then Sean announcing his retirement? And just to remind people that maybe haven't seen it, is that Kenny was really upset, and he said that's in Sean, never prepared like I wanted him to, and he was essentially saying that the way he prepared meant that he was fighting Terence Crawford blindfolded. What was your take on Daddy Porter's comments after the fight, and then Sean's announcement that he was retiring, Mark?
I don't get it. Now let me back up for some of you listeners. Cool. I've known these guys since, I guess, 2016 when they were preparing for Keith Thurman, who was then the best welterweight in the world. And I was taken by this. Forgive me for the digression. Tell me to shut up if it
No, you carry on. We love a digression.
But you can tell, most of it, especially, God, in America, every father-son, trainer-fighter relationship has its own pathology. And I'm watching Kenny and Sean day one, and I'm thinking, this is going to end terrible. This is back in 2016 because Kenny's got his hands over him all the time. He's not just on him, he's crushing him. And I figure Sean's out. And Sean says to me, "No, you don't understand. I'm with my dad no matter what." There's a story that I found about Kenny Porter when he was a 4-year-old kid growing up in Cleveland. His mom, had to work nights. She worked at a numbers joint, a gambling house. Not like you have over there, an illegal gambling house.
Yeah. So wasn't one of Don King's in Cleveland?
It was actually one of Don King's spots. So everything comes around. So, the kid starts crying, gives him a piece of candy. No, he's still crying. He wants the mom. So a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old go out in the streets of the Cleveland ghetto and looking for the mom. They almost get there. They almost cross the street. And Kenny is leading the way, turns around, boom. His kid brother, who was left in his charge, is hit by a car, probably a drunk driver. And what both Sean and Kenny told me, quite candidly, is that is the moment that informs their entire relationship. So it's not about Kenny Porter being a control freak just for the hell of it. He has this idea that I will leave nothing up to chance. And he has and this is what he takes. Both of them acknowledges this is what he takes into every moment of his day, much less every training session. Now, first to your question, the eye test. Sean didn't look like a guy who was unprepared to me. Did he look like a guy who was unprepared to you?
No, not at all.
Okay, all right. Now, I did get a sense, and it wasn't, how can I say this? I didn't have it strong enough to write it or correct enough journalistically to write it, that there was some kind of, I don't think Sean's the kind of guy to take off in training, whatever Kenny said, but I do think that, and this happens with Kenny, you have a very, very, very powerful ego. So at some point they thought they wanted to do things different ways. I don't think that means take off in training.
Sure.
So I'm not entirely sure what Kenny was talking about. I thought in my heart it was premature, but I also think that going back to my original story about Kenny, whatever he said, his number one job, unlike some of these knuckleheads we've seen out here, especially in the States of late, who will let their sons fight through, fight to appease their own egos and their own ambitions. Kenny's first order of the day, his first priority was to protect not just his son, but the kid who would become, in many senses, his surrogate brother. I mean, gotcha. I know that's Freudian and all that other shit, but I do believe that. I believe his first priority was protection there. And once Terrence hits you like that, Terrence is a savage finisher. I think that he saw what was to come.
Yeah, listen. There's 99 seconds left in that round, and then there's 2 more rounds. And the Crawford we've seen, all those stoppages, and what's more, how cold and how brutal and savage and clinical he can be once he's got you hurt. I completely agree. So later on, when he announces Sean, after a terrific career, go everywhere, travel everywhere, entertain people everywhere, and also a guy that people love. He lights up the room. I know it sounds like a cliche. Well, he does. He's got those big white gnashers. He smiles. People gravitate towards him. You've seen him in Las Vegas casinos and during fights when he's not fighting. He's always got as many people around him as anybody. The only person with more people around them is Bob Arum. That's the absolute truth when it comes to fight night. So the decision that he made later on to call it a day, is that solid? Because things could have changed in the 8 or 9 hours since he said that. I know it's morning. I know it's Las Vegas time, early morning for you. So is that still you understand that that's it? Sean Porter is walking off into the boxing sunset.
As of right now, yes. But Steve, you know how fighters retire. If it is, listen, he's done great. He's made his money.
Yeah. He's
gone through everyone in the division, won some, lost some. Yeah. I will say this, and I don't know. I don't think it plagues boxing in the UK in quite the same way it plagues it here. Although I guess certain fights you guys have never seen. First among them, Joshua Fury, which now could never be worth what it was. But in an age, certainly in the States, where the rule and not the exception was undefeated fighters and elite fighters not fighting each other until they were too damn old for anyone to give a shit. Yeah. Sean Porter fought every single guy in his prime, never ducked anybody. And we were having this discussion of course, screaming, yelling amongst ourselves about pound for pound, but you can never put together a real pound for pound list until you have guys like Sean Porter who don't find who instead of finding a reason not to take a fight, it's not the right time, I can get a couple shekels more down the road. Instead, they say yes. Yes. Now, I do believe Terrence Crawford is that kind of guy, but in a lot of ways, if this was a kind of a glory decade, or at least an interesting decade, post-Mayweather, an interesting period for the welterweight division, it was built on the back of guys like Sean Porter, because they didn't say no. They said yes. One other thing I don't mean to get corny here, but as a tribute to Sean, how many to me, boxing is good for guys like me and you.
Yep.
It's not so good for the fighters. How many guys, a few exceptions, how many guys do you know really, truly, in their heart, are happy warriors? Sean was one of them.
Yeah.
And I can't, I can count on one hand.
It's a short list, Mark. You're so right. That's a great observation.
The guys who get out with their heart, their dignity, and their pocketbooks intact.
Yeah, and Sean's got a fantastic sunset to ride off into with lots of people calling him. And I'm for one, I don't ever want to see Sean, even if he's a high-class gatekeeper. I don't even want to see him as any type of gatekeeper. Right. 3 defeats before the other night, all of those close decisions. There's an argument that he could have won all 3 of those fights with a slightly different round. So, won the world title twice, lost it twice, absolutely nothing else to do. People People like him. Hopefully, it done some good numbers. Hopefully, he'll walk away with a nice few quid. I'm not sure if it's his best payday. I understand it was Crawford's best payday. So now let's move on to Terence Crawford then. Because here's a guy, 7.5 years ago, he wins a world title. He's won a world title at 3 different weights. He's one of the few men, I think it's only 6 of them now, to have actually won all 4 of the modern belts. That have been around since 1988. He did that a few years ago. This was his, as I said earlier, it was his 16th world title fight. 13 of them have ended early. And afterwards, him and Bob Arum, well, they were a study. They were a study in classic boxing relationship. You know, we have a guy called, you remember Mickey Duff, the old boxing promoter we had here? He was around for 100 years and he was a great man and he was the most knowledgeable boxing man I've ever known. And he kept, he knew 15-year-old schoolboys when he was, when he was 80 odd years of age. He still knew what was happening with 15-year-old schoolboys, as well as knowing who was on the undercard when Sugar Ray Robinson lost his world title to Randolph Turpin in 1951. I mean, he was beyond encyclopedic. He really was. It was absurd. Mickey Duff had a great expression when he fell out with Lloyd Hunnigan, who of course beat Donald Curry in Atlantic City in a great big shock. Lloyd Hunnigan was screaming blue murder, I'm not being paid enough money, Duff this, Duff that. And Mickey Duff said, I've checked the contract and it doesn't say anywhere in the contract that I have to like him, and I don't like him, I just promote him. And I thought there was a little bit of that with Bob Arum. I mean, their body language was odd. And then I look back at some of the things they said exactly a year ago. Do you remember Bob Arum said a year ago, Terence has got to promote himself. He might be the greatest fighter in the world, but I'm not going bankrupt promoting him. And Terence Crawford replied, it probably was an interview that you did, his job is promoting, my job is fighting. I get paid for fighting, he gets paid for promoting. Well, my understanding is their contract is now up, and it might continue on a fight-by-fight basis. Equally, Crawford, as he said last night at the press conference, I'm sure you were there, said he might just walk away and continue his career. Just fill me in, before we look at potential opponents, Mark, fill me in on the post-fight science of whatever happened.
Well, first of all, he's a free agent.
Good.
That's the most, I mean, that's the news here. His contract with Top Rank is now out. He's a free agent, probably the best thing for him. As far as the up and down relationship, I thought that Top Rank did a great thing in buying out his previous, or whatever it was, acquiring him from his previous promoter and helping to bring him, because Terence really did the hard work. I mean, he did the fighting, helping to bring him from obscurity in a as far as boxing, a place no one knew fighters came from, Omaha, Nebraska. To bring him help bring him from obscurity into this pound for pound conversation. I think for a good part of the last several years, he's been number one, and all that stuff is biased. And
yeah, of course. But
when he re-upped with Top Rank, Terence Crawford had a very clear understanding that just like the then Wilder Fury fight was going to be made, that they were going to make this deal with Errol Spence. And that's what he really wanted. And that's what, for whatever reason, could not be delivered. And I think that's the fissure right there. I mean, how attractive a commercial property Terence Crawford is. I think he's very attractive, but the crazy, screwy thing about our business is what we consider attractive as boxing guys, and what the general public, God help them, considers attractive. You know, I mean, let me put it to you.
Two very different things.
He might be the greatest fighter in the world, but he's no Jake Paul. And that sucks that we have to even say that.
But it's the truth, and that's essentially what Bob said last year. And my understanding, before we look at what might happen now, and we'll deal with Spence in a moment. Spence, by the way, for people that are not sure, is recovering from an operation to correct a detached.
By the way, Spence was here last night.
Yeah, I know, and apparently
he walked right the hell out.
I'm told Crawford had no idea he was there. But before we move on to that, I think Crawford last year, about a year ago, when the negotiations for a Spence fight, which obviously between Arum and his deadly rivals in a Premier Boxing Champions, PBC, owned or run or whatever the word is by the former music guy Al Heyman. Is it not true that at that time Crawford was asking for 60% of the 100% and not a 50-50 split? Or was that something that was just thrown thrown around because PBC are very good at spreading disinformation. Everybody who's good in boxing is good at spreading disinformation, Mark. That's our business, and I mean that nicely. That's a compliment.
It's not our business. It's their business.
Sorry. Excuse me.
No. What I heard, well, first of all, you had Spence's infamous, well, he's on the other side of the street.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. And that did at the time suggest to me that he didn't want to fight. Yeah. Or that Heyman told him this wasn't correct right now. I heard the opposite, that it was Spence who was insisting on 60-40 or even 70-30 on the basis of him having more belts than Crawford. Yeah. I don't think Crawford ever asked for more money. I think that he may have asked for 50-50, but the reports that I recall distinctly had Spence asking for more because he had more belts.
Okay, and you mentioned there briefly, that Spence put in an appearance. Crawford didn't know. Did anybody speak to Spence, and is there any inside information on this eye? An eye injury which forced him out of a fight in the summer against Manny Pacquiao. Is there any suggestion when the eye might be re-examined and it might be given a green light? Is there any suggestion, Mark?
I don't have that, and I am remiss in that because I've just been on the road covering the Top Rank fights for 2 months. I've been living out of these hotel rooms for 2 months. So I haven't heard on the eye, but to me, I called and asked, hey, listen, we'd really like to interview him during the fight. I was told, he'll be there to support Sean. Okay, great. But I've never heard of a fighter, regardless of the organization, with this kind of money potentially on the line, declining to make his point of view known after a fight. And that includes guys going, across promotional entities. So I thought it was curious. A, he turned down the request for us to speak to him during the fight. And I'm not a biased guy. Listen, I worked for Showtime at one point. When I first met, Sean. I also thought it was peculiar and not a particularly good look for him that as soon as the fight was over, he got up and split.
Yeah, I'm completely on your side because on Saturday night we had a show in the UK and it was a Sky show, and Tyson Fury's cousin was fighting for the British title, Hosea Burton. He got beat. Tyson Fury was there and he gladly did an interview. It wasn't a great interview, but he did an interview with BT, who are Tyson Fury's broadcast company partners in the UK. He gladly did an interview with Sky. It wasn't a great interview, I said, but he did it. So I'm a little bit annoyed with Sean. So where does Crawford go now? Now, before we get on to Josh Taylor, the Scotsman who was, I think, also ringside last night, what's your gut feeling about where Crawford goes now, Mark?
I think if he's smart, he's a free agent.
Yeah,
he's good enough. He doesn't need a steady promoter now. Now maybe Top Rank's called in because they know how to promote certain fights or work with certain promoters. I think that, in practicality, it would probably behoove everyone. If it's a Josh Taylor fight, it's more convenient. If it's a Josh Taylor Crawford fight, it's more convenient to do a lot of it through Top Rank, or some of it. If it's a PBC fight and Al Heyman, and it's a Spence fight, and Al Heyman is running the show, then I think that the likelihood is it's a straight up PBC show. There is no doubt. He said it again last night. He said it before. Sean wanted Crawford. Crawford wants Spence, has wanted Spence. I think that's really ultimately what led to the split with Top Rank. Forget all the other stuff. That fight was, for whatever reason, was not delivered. And that was the fight he was told he would have. That's the fight he wants to hang his hat on. So it depends. It depends who he fights next.
It does depend on who he fights next, and whether he takes inferior, slightly easier one, or whether he does some sort of deal with PBC and looks at Spence and maybe looks at Jamel Charlo after that. As we move through the potential list and the potential places he can go with particular fights. Now, Josh Taylor was there; he was ringside, and you. I think did you grab hold of Josh Taylor before the fight or after the fight?
I spoke to him during the week, and I spoke to him last night.
Okay, now because obviously the fight that Crawford wants and the one that you're talking about there is the big one with Errol Spence, who's got a couple of the other belts. I think he's got the IBF and he's got the WBC. A Cuban called Yordenis Ugas has got a version of the WBA, and of course the WBO belongs to Terence Crawford, which was the belt he retained last night. That's the fight he wants in some sort of ideal world for things, as you say, fall out. Let me ask you this, Mark, and this is quite a serious question. If this fight never happened, if Crawford against Spence never happened, where would you put that in your, just a loose, quick list? I know I haven't asked you to prep for this. It would have made no difference because, as you say, you had a big night. But where would you put it in a loose list of big fights that didn't happen? Or I'm even going to allow you big fights that happened 6 or 7 or even 8 years too late. Where would you put it if it never happened?
Right now, in my slightly impaired state, I'd put it at the number one, the most egregious fight that didn't happen. Certainly of our time, because there's no damn reason for this. And what pissed me off about Pacquiao Mayweather is that damn thing took longer to make one stink ass fight. And that's what it was when it finally
happened.
Then it took Ali and Frazier to fight a trilogy.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the damn problem here. And there's this great debate. I don't know if it's particularly pertinent in the UK, but why is boxing getting its ass kicked by MMA? And that right there is why, because MMA, I guess it's a monopoly or is one leading organization. Yep. And Dana says, okay, you're going to fight you. That's the way it is.
And if you don't like it, absolutely.
But that's why this shouldn't happen. We shouldn't be talking about this thing. We shouldn't be talking about this thing for years. They should have fought twice already.
No, and listen, and then it trickles down through the weights. It goes up through the weights, it comes down through the weights. Every now and again, we get things thrown together, but you're absolutely right. In the last 5 or 6 or 7 years, not obviously as big as Spence against Crawford, but there are 20, 30 fights that should have happened. And as you say, things like Mayweather and Pacquiao happening when it did, when I think 4 or 5 years earlier, it would have been a great fight. Let's leave that.
But Steve, wait. One of the symptoms of this, do you ever recall a time in your career where there were more goddamn undefeated fighters?
Never.
They ain't perfect fighters.
Never. Listen, we have a situation here in the UK. I think on Saturday night in the UK there were 7 shows, and I think if I'm not mistaken, there was something like there were 80 odd fights in the 7 shows, and of those 80 fighters, there's about 70 of them are unbeaten. We've never had this. I mean, it's absurd. How can we have so many unbeaten fighters? Anyway, you're right, and that's something to look at. So if you get hold of an old Ring magazine, the Ring book, Mark, not the Ring magazine. You get hold of the big Ring book, and you look through 1973, and you look at every single one of the title fights that year, and you see how many of those fighters in 1973, when there was WBC, WBA, let's say there were 22 title fights that year. I'm going to tell you now that no more than 3 of those men in those 22 world title fights would have been unbeaten. The equivalent now, 90%, 80% of them would have been unbeaten. Anyway, I tell you what, it's a good pod for another day. Let's move on to Josh Taylor. He owns all 4 of the light welterweight belts. He's got, or super lightweight, whatever you want to call them. He's got a defense which he has to do because he did a deal. He did a lovely deal with a man called Jack Cattrall from the Northwest here. Lovely fighter, Jack. Another unbeaten kid, nice kid. For Feb 26, I think in Edinburgh or Glasgow, somewhere in Scotland, it will take place on Feb 26. He's got to go through with that fight. What was he doing yesterday? Was he talking Crawford or was he talking anybody else?
He was all week to me. He's been talking Crawford, not in an antagonistic way, but I think it's it's pretty clear. And my understanding is that the Catterall fight, was the price or the down payment or the after payment on
100%.
getting the unification.
100% it was.
So the guy he's really talked about, and the guy he predicted to win last night, was Crawford. I have been arguing for, I think, close to 2 years now, when it looked like the Spence fight was an impossibility, and I thought that Terrence was under contract for a longer time. That the best fight that could be made outside of Spence was then the winner of Ramirez Taylor. They saw each other in the gym this week, in the top ranked gym. Josh describes it as a very cordial, respectful meeting, but I do know they were checking each other out. I mean, like, guys meet in a bar, they check each other out. Like, that's just, it's human nature. But I think it's really human nature for these two particular fighters. I think that it's a great fight, presuming, as I think that we all presume that he will get, that Josh will get by Catterall. Yeah. When you put them side by side, Josh is actually taller. He's not longer in terms of reach. He's not longer, but I find so many. I spent a lot of time with Terrence a few years ago, in Omaha.
Yeah, you make some lovely films. You make some lovely films.
And thank you. And I spent some time with Josh when he came to the States here last time, and again this week. And to me, these two guys are so damn similar in terms of temperament. They both have a very pronounced chip on their shoulder. They're incredibly accomplished technicians, and I mean this as a compliment. They are both mean fighters.
Oh, they are mean. They are mean.
Josh, Terrence calls it a killer instinct or mean streak or whatever, and Josh calls it a wickedness.
Yeah.
But they both have that thing. They're very spiteful fighters. That's Ben Davison's term. I thought it was really brilliant, but I don't know how Josh would adjust to the weight. I'm assuming he is so talented and has such a large frame that eventually he would do well. But I think that is outside of Crawford Spence, it's a really, really interesting fight, and that has great merit.
Yeah, I think, we saw him against Regis Prograis, in London, a couple of years ago. And I think take COVID out of the situation and take X, Y, and Z out of the situation. I think Josh would have been fighting at welterweight 6 months ago. And I think he'll be an unnaturally powerful welterweight. I think he's been at light welter as long as he needs to be at light welter. That fight against Catterall was meant to be Feb 18. It's not going to be Feb 18. So it's going to be. So it was meant to be December 18. It's now going to be, as I said, it's going to be moved to Feb 26. And that I'm convinced that's the end of Josh at 140 pounds.
I think so. I think so too. His line to me was, "What do I have to prove?" Left at 140, and of course here in the States, we are all in love with Teofimo. And he got particularly. He was like, I quoted the articles to him. I said, Josh, you've called him a clown, a little rat, and a brass neck. I asked him, is brass neck a term that I can use on American television? He assured me that I could, but obviously he didn't like him. But his response was, I don't want to talk about that guy. And that's where you got I don't even want to talk about that guy. I still think it's an interesting fight, but for whatever reason, he can't stand the guy, but more than that, he wants to move up.
Yeah, he wants to move up. It's his turn to move up. Teofimo's younger than him, and then Teofimo can move up after him, and he wants to chase him. He can chase him up. We're going to move on to Teofimo Lopez now, and his much delayed, much talked about, much debated, much argued about fight against George Kambosos, the Australian who found himself in a situation where he won a split decision over Lee Selby in October of 2020, then found himself the subject of a purse bid. And the purse bid was that ridiculous purse bid, you know the one, where Top Rank bid 2.3 million, Matchroom bid 3.5 million, both of which I thought were perfectly decent figures for an unknown Australian. No disrespect to Kambosos against Teofimo Lopez. Lopez, of course, fresh from giving Vasyl Lomachenko a boxing lesson. That's a statement I never thought I'd utter. And of course, Triller stepped in with 6.018 million. Well, of course, Triller stepped in with that, but it didn't come to fruition. There was chaos. The purse bid was revealed on Feb 25th. They will eventually fight this Saturday in the basement, as I call it, at Madison Square. Listen, it's still called the basement. I'm sorry, I'm calling it the basement. People, you can call it all the fancy theatres you want to call it. It's the basement. It's the small house underneath the big house. You know that, Mark.
Steve, I grew up 2 blocks from there.
Bingo.
Yeah, it is the basement. We used to call it was called the Felt Forum when I was a kid. Listen, it's a decent enough venue when they get to say I fought at the Garden. And listen, we had a great fight there, a great 140-pound fight there the other day where Josue Vargas where Zepeda, who is now Josh Taylor's, I don't know if this is worth anything or not, now Josh Taylor's WBC mandatory, scored a big knockout. But
we've had good fights
there. It's in the basement, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. And Teofimo should knock him out. Yeah. It's been, again, the frustrating thing about this is I don't begrudge if Triller wants to get in the boxing business and they want to bid 6+, God bless him, but at least do a competent job of staging the damn fights, get it out there, and it became such a damn drama. And the shame of this for people like us and for the fans is that you come out of 2020 with this authentically interesting new character. Who is this kid Teofimo? This is new and it's interesting. I want to see him. And now it's been a year and a month, and you haven't seen a damn thing from him except news about purse bids and all this other crap.
Well, Mark, I caught up with a pair of them the other day, and we're going to start with Lopez. Now, obviously, I got him on what would be a good day for him, but a bad day for an interview, don't mind me saying so, because his son had just been born, and he was all over the place. But I quite like that about him. Here is Teofimo Lopez from his car, having just left the hospital where he was holding his newborn son.
It's great. I just, yesterday, he was born yesterday, and the feelings, man, I'm still up in the clouds right now.
And let me tell you something, you might stay in those clouds for an awful long time. That's the truth.
No, it's every time I carry him, every time I hold him, I'm mesmerized. Yeah, mesmerized.
Well, at some point in the next 10 or so days, you're going to have to tear yourself away from your new son and get on with the business of this boxing, unfortunately, man.
It's okay. I'm gonna make it quick, just so I can go back to my son. Yeah,
yeah, that's probably not good news for George. Teofimo, let me ask you a question. Where are you right now in the boxing landscape? We've got Tyson Fury in that enormous fight recently, Canelo in an enormous fight just the other night, Alexander Usyk beating AJ in front of 70,000 people. Where does the new daddy Teofimo Lopez fit in that landscape?
Top 5, easily top 5. And I think I'll show everyone, not that I know I will show everyone November 27th, top 5 easily.
Now, Teofimo, this crazy situation, the purse bid was exactly 9 months ago. How frustrating have those 9 months been?
Man, it's been something. It's been something, but it's during that time, I just took the time to really just focus on me. I can't believe it though. 9 months, how time flies. And it's I'm a little disappointed. I didn't get to fight as many times as I had hoped to fight this year. But things happen the way they do. And I'm just very, very looking forward to November 27th already. I think it's about time. I'm looking forward to 2022 and trying to fight at least 3 times next year. Minimum.
Has it been difficult handling the 13 months since you were last in the ring, especially as that was such a fantastic, brilliant performance?
Yeah, you're only as good as your last performance, but I just feel like this has been too long of a last performance, right? So it's I just want to show everyone, I want to show myself, and it's definitely been I would say a great experience throughout this whole thing, a great life experience, and it was very much needed in the way of how do I handle and carry myself from this point forward. Especially in the boxing world that we live in today.
And let me ask you this, Tiafimo, and it's about your opponent. What does George bring to the table? What are George's strengths as a fighter?
Well, as a fighter, someone that comes forward and he's always he's a counter puncher, tries to do the things that he can, to get the win. I think he's someone that's definitely he doesn't have the power. I think we all have seen that he does not have the power, but he does have combinations, and he's someone that just keeps coming forward. So it's definitely going to be an all action packed fight. And depending how long we want to make it. And it's I truly believe that it's going to be a great fight. George Kambosos is someone that's very hungry. He's determined to. He really wants to go out there and make this fight happen. And I'm not going to overlook him. No, he's not no pushover. Every fighter that I face from this point forward is going to be someone that is definitely going to test me. Is going to push me to where I need to get to.
And the thing is, Tiafimo, you understand the business. You and your father understand the business. There's a history of guys, good guys, favourites in big fights like this, with loads of other fights on the horizon, overlooking men like Kambosos, overlooking guys who are fearless with nothing to lose. What have you done to make sure that you don't look beyond him and look at some of the big fights that we were talking about, 12 months ago?
Because it's very simple. It's not hard. Why? Because at the end of the day, you can't have those big fights without the guy that you got to beat the guy that's in front of you first. I don't overlook these fighters that I face in front of me. I look through them. I don't look around them. I look right through them. And I punch right through them. So, for me, my mentality has always been the same. If not, it has gotten stronger. It has gotten better. I've gotten to connect much more in a motivational way. When you carry all those belts, and I mean, when you carry all the belts in boxing, and when you hold that Ring Magazine belt, the most prestigious belt, the lineal belt, right? When you hold those things, if that doesn't motivate you to want to do more in this, then you're in the wrong business. You're in the wrong sport. You're in the wrong everything. So for me, that mentality, of course, you have Kambosos and he's hungry, striving, ready, but you gotta know that you're just catching up. I've been at the mentality since I was younger, and I'm only gotten strong. Excuse me, but I've only gotten stronger. So it's gonna be a great fight, though.
Because there is a lot of expectation. You found yourself in a position after the win against Lomachenko where people were suddenly putting you with, in some big company, and that's expectation. Is that the kind of pressure you like, or is it to you not pressure at all?
No, I love it. I love it. It's not pressure at all. This is what I know I was meant to do. I don't see myself making $100 million. I don't see myself making tens of millions of dollars. No, I see myself making much more than that. It's more than the financial part. It's about the legacy, the glory. The rest will come. It always comes. And you got to have that vision and that mindset. A perfect example could be, we could say right now in today's era, a perfect example in the latest addition to boxing's era, Floyd Mayweather. He is someone that will tell you exactly right there. The blueprint was stay focused, stay dedicated, and pretend like you're broke, train like you're broke, like you never had anything. And if you can't quite get that, you'll lose it real quick. So, Floyd understood it. I think that's one of the greatest things that I learned from Floyd Mayweather, and all these past legends that have paved the way for us in our sport. So I'm looking forward to November 27th. I really am looking forward to see everyone's facial expressions afterwards, how they felt about the fight, what they thought about how I looked, and how they feel, and where do they get me at right now at that moment with this performance, with this type of fighter, and X, Y, and Z. Because I love what I do, and I'm excited. I love to hear what the critics have to say. I love to hear what people have to say. about me, because I gets to motivate me more to keep going. Okay, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? Let's keep it going.
And will it be just a relief when you finally get that knock knock on the dressing room door and you're told it's 5 minutes before your ring walk? Will that be just a tremendous relief for you, Teofimo?
Oh yeah, that's when I go from I don't know what I turned into after that. I don't I from once they tell me 5 minutes, that's it. I zone out. I mean, I'm in the mood. Don't get me wrong, but I don't remember. I guess it's just tunnel vision. That feeling though is just yeah, I'm getting pumped, man. I'm looking forward to it. I really am.
And on the subject of your new baby son, do you think that you're going to be looking at pictures of him gurgling away and, whilst you're in the change room? Or are you going to try and lock yourself away? Because there's two trains of thought. Some boxers like to have their family and pictures of their family real close to them, and others like to close the door and ignore them during those final hours. What will you do?
No, I'm a family man, so I leave everyone around and everything. But I think once it gets close to um like 30 minutes or so, that's when I start closing out. And I tell people like, all right, let's start pretty much let's empty the room and just try to keep the team now. I'll see everybody afterwards. But so I'm a little bit in between. But I'll definitely be seeing my son's photos and everything of me carrying him just yesterday and just staring at those.
And finally, as we wind down, and thanks so much for your time here. I appreciate you under a lot of pressure, and it's been a great 24 hours for you. How will the team look? Are there any changes, big changes inside the team, or is it just normal Lopez team?
Normal Lopez team, and if anything, it got smaller. So it's we got to keep our circle tight, and our our enemies tighter. So it's just trying to keep everything. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
But Teofimo, that's not the way you're meant to do it. When you win big fights and you're in big fights, you're meant to get 500 other people who wear full fur coats, man, and loads of crazy people in your changing room. You're meant to have superstars. You're meant to have about 200 people in there. What are you doing? You can't do that. You're a superstar.
But at the end of are they going to go in the ring and fight for me?
No, they're not, man.
All right, then. There you go. But with with time, I'm looking forward to just everything. I can't wait to express my emotions and my feelings to what I love to do in the sport, and to give people what they want: knockouts, entertainment, excitement, backflips, and just a little bit more of Teofimo Lopez.
So Teofimo there, giving me nice stuff, and obviously delighted for him. I could do a couple of things first. Now you know the kid well. I love the idea that the more famous he's getting, the better he's getting, the smaller the team is. He's getting away with everybody. It's going to be a situation where it's just going to be him and his dad.
I love the kid. Really, straight up love the kid. I don't feel like Josh. And I like the dad, who's an acquired taste. Let me put it that way. A small team is great as you get more famous.
Yeah.
But for me, from my perspective, the nutritionists that he was using for the Loma fight, perfecting athletes.
Yeah.
Those women, can I curse on your broadcast?
You can.
Those women are great. I mean, they're really great. If you take take the case of, for instance, Jamel Herring.
Yeah.
Who was a welterweight really in the amateurs.
Yeah, big old boy.
A lightweight for most of his pro career. And as he got older, he was able to win titles at 130 pounds. As you get older, Steve, we both know you don't shrink when you get older.
Oh, no, you don't.
And I think that the work that they did with Jamel Herring was typical. And, to me, it was good results for Teofimo. It's been uniformly good results for boxers and MMA fighters. These women, the nutritionists, perfecting athletes. So I don't know. I'm all for small teams. I don't know if that was the place to cut.
Well, listen, if you're going to make a cut, no disrespect to George Kambosos, you make your cut now, not when you're going into a massive fight or a super fight. Now, I also caught up with George because it's only fair, even though, he's a fairly substantial underdog, which he understands, don't get me wrong. But I talked to him more about the About the indecision, about the weight and all of the false starts to this fight, because obviously his family's in Australia, he is based in Miami. So here's George Kambosos, who's fighting Teofimo Lopez in the old basement, the old Felt Forum at Madison Square Garden this Saturday in New York. Here's George on the weight.
Yeah, look, it's been a roller coaster, road, and it has taken time, but I've stayed very patient, focused on my craft, gotten better and better every day. And, it doesn't matter how long it takes. War takes a long time, for it to be complete. And I've taken this that way, that it's not one in a day, not one in a month, but, we're here now. And let's hope he rocks up, because every day and every postponement has not been on my fault. It's all been on him.
Yeah, it's been, as you say, a roller coaster seems about the perfect description. George, just explain to me your training setup, because I'm not talking to you in Sydney or Melbourne, am I? I'm not talking to you from New York or Las Vegas. Tell me your training setup the last 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, look, obviously I was here for 4 months in Miami, leading up to the June 19th. I had my whole team here, my Australian coach here with my American coach, my father, even brought my wife out, for the fight week. Oh. And unfortunately, we got COVID. She was pregnant at the time as well. So, it was a bitter pill to swallow. I stayed for a little bit longer. And then when I realized that he was never going to be ready, even though I would have loved to fight on that date, I went back home. I got my kids back home, my family. I wanted to go see them. And, we continue preparation in Australia. I've got a fantastic gym in Sydney, great sparring, great team there. And everything has really been, perfect. No stone has been unturned. And then we flew out here about a week and a half ago, and we're wrapping up camp here. We had our final sparring session yesterday. We're just ready. We have got a great team. Literally no egos in this team. We are all going for one thing, and that's to win this fight. And we can't wait to get into New York and, shake New York up and shake the world up as well.
I think there's a lot of people inside boxing can't wait for you two to finally get in the ring. Now, is it fair to say, George, and again, this is not a slight on you, and I mean it, is it fair to say that in general the focus here is on Teofimo Lopez? It's on Lopez. It's on the man who does most of the talking. It's on the man who beat Lomachenko. Is that fair to say?
Look, to be honest, where's he been? Been very quiet. The talk hasn't been too much. The talk's been more on my side, and I think more people are interested in what I've got to say, because everything I say is real, and I say it the way it is. From him, you don't know what you're going to get. You get a lot of lies. That's for a fact. It doesn't bother me. He's got all the belts. He's the big star at the moment. He's the big celebrity. He's in the bright lights. He's caught up in it. So that's fine. I'm happy the way I am. I'm happy with my preparation and going under the radar. Less obligations for me if you look at it in that sense. I can continue preparing and focusing on my job, and that's winning this fight.
Yeah, and listen, and I agree with exactly what you said there. And also, even though the Triller bid vanished, and that was an awful lot of money, the bid at the moment is still an awful lot of money for a challenger. I mean, I know it's not as much as you were getting for a couple of months, but it's still phenomenal. It's still fantastic money, George.
Look, for me, it's not about the money, though. For me, it's about my legacy. You could take that all away. You could even take, at this point, you can take all the belts away, and it's just me and him. And this is about my legacy and getting that name on my record and proving to the world and showing the world how hard I've prepared for this fight. It's great for my family. I've got 3 kids. Obviously, I had a newborn a few weeks ago, and it secures their future. But this is more than that.
And just one quick one, George, on the state of play in Australia. Every now and again we have a couple of fighters over the last. I've been in the business 35 years, and every now and again there's an Australian guy that comes along and he gets a lot of publicity and he has a lot of success. What would it be like if you were champion? Would you try and have some fights in Australia? Is that something that you'd like in your heart?
This victory will be the most rarest thing in Australian boxing, because it's never been done before. No one's coming back home with 5 belts. I will be already on the face of Australian boxing. I'm represented on the world scene, but this will be an enormous historic victory in sport, let alone boxing in Australia. And yes, that is the plan, to come back to Australia and hold mega fights, stadium fights. You see it, we do the numbers, 70 to 80,000 people. If I'm bringing all them belts back home, you best believe that these are mega fights and stadium fights, and that's all to come. But for now, my focus is on Lopez.
And just the final one is the smallest question. Trust me, I'm looking in your eyes. I'm seeing you. I saw you in the build up to Selby. I saw you after that fight. I've seen enough clips of you. You look about as relaxed and calm as I've seen a guy going into a big fight. Are you surprised by how relaxed and calm you are, George?
This is what I do. You know, this is what I love. This is what I've dreamt about for so many years. These are the moments when I was a young kid, you know, running late at night and thinking one day that's what I want to do. I want to get to that level. So, you know, I feel like I've been at this moment a million times. I've dreamt of this moment. So, what I got to be angry for? You know, at the end of the day, in everyone's eyes, I'm the underdog anyway. So, I'm enjoying the moment. I'm relaxed. I'm cool, calm, collected, and I will win this fight. There is no pressure. I know what I'm about, and just like the Selby fight, there is intent. There is a lot of intent. Best believe that, and I am fully focused. But I'm enjoying the moment. I'm very relaxed as well.
George, that was a lovely interview. The only thing you did wrong, if you don't mind me saying so, and I'm telling you this will work golden for the future, is when you talk about running late at night, you've got to follow all of the great Australian fighters and run barefoot. You've got to run barefoot like Peter Rose did. You can't tell me you're running at night and not say you're barefoot. You've got to say I'm doing 10 miles barefoot every night in the outback.
Look, this fight's been postponed enough, so we don't want to step on a bindi and end up postponing it before.
That's the comeback, George. George, thanks very much indeed for your time this afternoon.
Cheers, thank you, appreciate it.
So George Kambosos there, serious about the fight. He spent an awful lot of money, he spent an awful lot of time preparing. And I like that line. I like the idea that when he wins, when I win, I'll go back to Australia as superstar. And he would go back to Australia as superstar. Not going to happen though, is it, Mark?
No, he's going to get knocked out.
Yeah.
Unless he should get knocked out. And again, no disrespect.
None taken.
To George Kambosos. I think Teofimo is that kind of talent. However, you know, Teofimo has a naturally tumultuous life around him. You know, if this year has proven to be too emotionally complex, remember, he's still a kid. He's still, a new father. I mean, a lot of stuff pulling at him. He's been very frank about with me about that before. He could have an off night, and if he does, of course, all of us will cry, "Oh my God, he was never that great," which is another form of nonsense. But he should knock out George Kambosos.
And let's assume he does get past Kambosos, who I think will go down, as we say, blazing, will go down on his shield, be carried out on his shield, and the rest of those brave fighter cliches. If he were to stay, Teofimo, at 135 pounds, at lightweight, as we call it, which, I'll be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure he will, because he's a big old boy. But there are some big old fights there. There's some, we've thrown around the sacred little sentence that they could be the new 4 kings or the new 5 kings. Well, that's maybe a bit too grand, but there's certainly some good fights around 130, 135, 136, 137. There's an awful lot of good fighters at those weights.
And I mean, look, the one I'd like to see is the one that everyone else would like to see at that weight is Devin Haney.
Yeah,
I wouldn't mind a Loma rematch, but I don't think that Teofimo has any intention of granting Lomachenko that rematch. I don't know how long he's going to stay. I mean, Ryan Garcia, it's been almost a year since he's been in the ring. That's it. All these guys are great on the internet.
Ryan Garcia's undefeated on the internet. He's had more fights on the internet than Archie Moore had in the ring. He's unbelievable.
But I mean, look, I think he's a really talented and interesting kid, and he has some power. But a year ago, he's talking to me about fighting Gervonta Davis, and he had me sold. Now, whether or not he can,
us all sold.
That fight could ever happen. But he does have some leverage here because he does have an almost Jake Paul style following, but we haven't seen him in a damn year.
No.
Devin Haney, got cracked by Linares. Yes, I this is typical of what I'm talking about with kids with the undefeated records. Of that crew, the only guy who's really been tested and won is Teofimo. But again, we haven't seen him in a year plus either.
Yeah. So Haney's defending his, fighting for the vacant WBC title lightweight against Joseph Diaz in early December at the MGM. Richard Commey's back, who of course Teofimo won a version of the world title from. Ryan Garcia, who I saw at a chat to at the Canelo fight, backstage at the Canelo fight. By the way, he looks bigger than Canelo. He looks enormous. So maybe his 135 days are a long time ago. Gervonta Davis obviously is also fighting for a version of the lightweight world title. Mark, listen, before I let you go, and it's been a delight and a pleasure, could I just say that I watched you working at the Maeva Hamadouche and Michaela Mayer fight. Okay, I was up in the balcony with a couple of people, John Denham from the Boxing News, Dan Raphael, and no word of lie, we watched you. We were dizzy with how much work you did and how many miles you did. And if you get your phone out and look at your kilometres and your steps for that day, you must have done about 15,000 steps that evening, running around, sitting down to get a 10-second clip with Mayer's father, and then running over to the other side to get a 5-second clip with Hamadouche's promoter, Eddie Hearn. I was applauding you. Couldn't you hear us shouting? We were applauding you from the balcony. We were proud of you.
Thank you. I'm just a nervous guy. But you know the funny thing though is that Michaela's dad came up to me.
Oh yeah.
I mean, can you imagine seeing your daughter in a life and death fight like that? See, this guy runs up to me, and he's not a sports guy. He's not a boxing guy. He's just sort of like kind of aging hippie guy, really sweet guy.
Yeah, you look like it. Yeah.
And I asked him, I said, how can you watch this? He goes, what are you kidding me? It's great.
I saw the interview afterwards, and I could see him. I could see, hand on heart, whilst he's talking to you, he's throwing punches in unison with her in the ring. Can I just tell people who didn't see that fight, who maybe haven't seen the report, who don't know much about it, Maeva Hamadouche, a French woman, defending her version of the world super featherweight title against Michaela Mayer defending her version at the Virgin property off the strip in Las Vegas. It's almost civilized. The night before Canelo fought against Caleb Plant was one of the most brutal and savage fights you're going to see involving any sex, in any year, in any weight. It was a special night. That was a pleasure to be ringside that night, not just to watch you running around like a crazy person. That was also fun. But Mark, this has been an absolute pleasure and delight having you on the show. Thanks so much for your time.
Take care, buddy. Have a great day.
So thanks again to my very old friend and one of the finest writers, not just of this generation, but of any generation, Mark Kriegel there. And I mentioned there briefly Dan Aziz and Hosea Burton for the British light heavyweight title. Dan Aziz did a great job, and I love his living homage to Marvin Hagler. He wears the shorts, he stands like Hagler. I like it. Aziz is the kind of kid that came up, we call it the hard way, the traditional way. Maybe try and get Aziz on the pod. Also, a big winner that night at Cruiserweight was Richard Riakporhe. That was a decent win he had. That was the Wembley show. That was on Saturday night. It's been a busy schedule. It's a busy schedule coming up. I know that much. There's 2 or 3 shows just about every single weekend between now and Christmas. We'll be at them. Some will be in this country. Some will be overseas. More on that to be revealed. I've been Steve Bunce. This has been the 5 Live Boxing Podcast. Thanks once again for listening, and see you next week.
Let's get ready to rumble!
5 Live Boxing.